The Madman! Hey, huge balance changes announced in Update 9.1. No official release date announced on when these will kick in, but I suspect it'll be after the final Hearthstone preliminaries, September 16, 17. So I predict that the patch will happen somewhere in the September 19, 2021 area. Alright, so starting with Innervate, this is probably the biggest change out of all of the cards. Innervate is a card that was running across all versions of Druid and was the powerhouse behind one of the strongest decks in the format, Token Druid. You could Innervate out Vicious Fledgling on turn 1. You could Innervate out your Bloodsail Corsair and also another 1-drop, and then put Mark of the Lotus on all of them, and that was ridiculous. Hydra on turn 3. Turn 3 8/8 is ridiculous. Turn 1 8/8 is ridiculous, but you could get that done. I think that Innervate just needed a change, and I liked their reasoning on why it got changed to gain 1 mana crystal instead of something like refresh 2 mana crystals, which is the change that I would have proposed. Innervate is a card that is in everyone's collection at the start of the game, so I know this sounds ridiculous, but refresh, that's a little bit confusing. But gaining mana crystals this turn, that makes sense. I think it's completely reasonable of a change. I think it will see play in a few niche decks. Probably not in Token Druid. Probably not in Jade Druid. That's good that both of the top Druid archetypes are knocked down a slight peg. Or a major peg even. Without Innervate, Vicious Fledgling, for example, gets a lot worse. Second biggest change, Fiery War Axe. For years now, this card has been dubbed the Fiery Wind Axe because it has been so far ahead of the curve. It's 2 Frostbolts in 1 2-mana card. It's a Fireball for a 2-mana card. Now it's 3 mana. I think it will still actually see play in Warriors. Majorly hits Pirate Warrior because you saw Pirate Warrior all the time play Fiery War Axe into Bloodsail Cultist. Now you can't do that. You saw all the time coin Fire War Axe into Bloodsail Raider. Now you can't do that. I think this change is excellent because Pirate Warrior was running all over the place, and this card was really insane in that deck. Given the lack of better options, probably gonna still see Fire War Axe in Pirate decks, but that definitely takes them down a peg. And Control Warriors have tended to be a deck that's good against aggro. Fire War Axe costing 1 more is definitely going to hurt, but it's still probably fairish. It opens up some design possibilities for a good 2-mana weapon for Warrior. So the Hex change looks really out of place because there are no Shaman decks right now running Hex, and the developer notes note as such that the change to Hex isn't a current power level problem, but it's meant for the future. Which is why I kind of wonder why the change went into play now, especially since no Shaman decks run Hex at the moment. If it were up to me, I probably would have made this change in like 2 months, when the next expansion was right around the corner. But okay, they're doing it ahead of time, that's fine. Brings it along the same power level as Polymorph. You got a 0/1 Frog with Taunt instead of a 1/1 Sheep. Murloc War Leader, very significant change. Other Murlocs have just +2 attack instead of +2/+1. This change was clearly aimed at exactly the Murloc Paladin deck right now, and the developer notes note that they were also thinking about changing Rockpool Hunter, but since Rockpool Hunter will rotate at some point and Murloc War Leader is in the base set, they changed just Murloc War Leader. This is definitely a very significant impact because Murloc Paladin is a major contender for a very strong deck. Maybe this tilts things in favor of Control Paladin. Maybe Murloc Paladin still plays Murloc War Leader anyways because the card still looks pretty good. It's going to really change the impact because decks tended to play Murloc War Leader, and on the turn that they played him, they would use their minions to trade into the opponent's minions and then really be able to snowball because their minions would survive at like 1 health or some such. And even after the War Leader was removed, that 1 health basically stood around. And finally, a really big change as well. Spreading Plague gets changed from 5 mana to 6 mana. Really interesting note is that in the developer notes, they consider changing Spreading Plague up to even 7 mana. I think 6 mana is fair. when I initially reviewed the card. I had it as a 5-star card, but I did lower it to a 4-star card because I said, well, if the meta is more control, there won't be that many Spreading Plague tokens created. I think that will now be an accurate statement for a 6-mana Spreading Plague. A lot of aggro decks get hit, a lot of Druid gets hit. This is really going to change things up. The Hearthstone team also considered changing Ultimate Infestation, but decided to let it stick, and Ice Block, but hinted very strongly that Ice Block would rotate into the Hall of Fame next year. So where does this leave us? The initial instinct is that Razakis Priest is going to be by far the best tier 1 deck. As of this present moment, Razakis Priest has the following bad matchups, and also it's worth noting that Razakis Priest is constantly being tuned and developed, so it's actually like continuing to go up, it's trending upwards. But it had a bad matchup against Jade Druid, has a bad matchup against Exodia Mage, has a slightly weak matchup against Murloc Paladin. Probably the biggest, most popular matchup where it was unfavored against was Pirate Warrior. Oh, and it also had like an even matchup against Token Druid. Anyways, all in all, those matchups were like slightly unfavored, but weren't even that unfavored. Now with all those decks like taking a step back, Razakis Priest not getting hit at all is going to, like, I think, be very clearly the best deck in the format, and it's going to be the deck to beat. So what are some decks that beat it? Well, Jade Druid will still beat it, and Exodia Mage beats it. Exodia Mage, also a deck that didn't get hit at all. The aggro is a little bit slower, so Exodia Mage will get better. Maybe it'll finally be time for that to be a major part of the metagame. The decks that weren't hit, which were like almost viable, will start rising to tier 2 status, is my prediction as well. Mid-range Hunter, Control Warlock, Control Mage, Hand Buff Paladin, Miracle Rogue. By the way, all of those decks are pretty fair against Razakis Priest as well. Worth mentioning that Big Priest is really good against Razakis Priest, because Big Priest runs all sorts of things that Razakis Priest is not able to remove. Yet another one of those decks that was weak against aggro decks, but aggro gets hit, Big Priest doesn't get hit. Big Priest might be great. Will this be the first control meta we see in Hearthstone? It's very, very difficult to ever call it a control meta, and people who call control metas are usually wrong. But I'm going to take a chance this time and say, welcome to the first bona fide control meta in Hearthstone. Could be wrong, but I think this is a real possibility. So yeah, it's going to shake up the meta a lot. It's very uncertain what's going to happen, but I feel good at least about decks being evened out. Also worth noting, by the way, since I said this is going to be a control meta, I don't know if ironically is the word to use here, but Jade Druid is pretty good against control decks. We could see the return of a very powerful deck of Jade Druid. So yeah, you can see there's a lot of ifs, and I think like we're actually going to see a cyclical meta of some sort. We're gonna have to see what control deck ends up at the top. There are some control decks that are better against control. There are some control decks that are better against aggro. Things are gonna change up. We'll see how things go.